So I just found out the coolest thing about mulberry trees that I didn't know before. And I'm going to tell you about that in just a second, but first I want to show you something really cool. I've got mulberry cuttings, and I've never owned mulberry before. The crazy thing is, I don't even have any mulberries and I've never grown them myself, but my buddy down in Texas, Mark Walker, finally got me into these things. I'm intrigued enough, it's about time I got some cuttings. His channel is The Overworked Gardener. I'll put a link down in the description below. Go check him out. In fact, he just posted a video about uppotting his mulberries. He's got tons of them. He's in love with them. Go check him out. All right, so these came in the mail just like this. And then I had them in my fridge overnight. This morning I pulled them out and I just set them all in this water so they'd soak up a bunch of moisture. I'm not going to do anything fancy with them. I'm just going to root these as hardwood cuttings. They're supposedly going to root very easily. I'm not going to cover them. I don't cover my hardwood cuttings. I just leave them open to air, have them in a pot of soil, keep them watered regularly, and we are at, what is today? I think it's May 29th, somewhere around there. So we're still just warming up in our part of the world here. We're in zone 8B, Western Washington, and they should be able to slowly start waking up with the rest of spring and then early summer and putting on some nice growth and roots through the summer with nothing else done to them. So normally I would like to go right below a node, but this cutting isn't that long, so, and I think these things root pretty easily, so I'm just gonna take a chunk off right there so I've got some fresh material opened up there. I'm gonna do that with all of these, and some of them do have nodes right where I'm gonna cut them, which is a great thing. I'm just gonna snip them down a little bit to open up fresh material. We don't want any hardened off areas that aren't moist. I am going to put some rooting hormone on these, and by the way, I'm just putting these right back in the water here. I am going to put some rooting hormone on these only because I purchased these that came all the way from the other side of the country, and I want to just give them that little extra insurance to ensure that they do root for me. Although I'm finding you probably don't need the rooting hormone. Now I'm going to get me some 1-gallon pots full of my finely ground fir tree bark. Like I've said before in many other videos, you can use anything that drains well but holds a little moisture. We've got 2 of them here for 2 different varieties. Okay, we've got our cuttings, we're prepared. I've got my rooting hormone. Now you're gonna see me dip those into this rooting hormone container. It's almost empty. I normally wouldn't do that, but this is just kind of some odds and ends I've been using for a few years now, and just for cuttings that I know are likely to root. I'm gonna label this one the Pakistani. And then this one is going to be World's Best here. And we've got each of our cups lined up with the corresponding pot. Don't want to mix up varieties. So the only last thing I'm going to do is just shave a little bit of bark off either side of that cutting there, just to open up more cambium for these little guys to root from. We'll just dip in some rooting hormone. Shake off the excess. And that little canister is going to be about done pretty soon here, but there it is. Then we just want to go straight down in the rooting medium. Like I said, this is my first time with mulberry, so we're going to learn a lot here. I'm just gonna push this down around these little guys just to make sure that it's got good contact with all that rooting medium. And then what I'll do is come back, throw a little more bark on top of all this just to fill it up to the brim here, and I'll give it a little time for that rooting hormone to kind of soak in some, and then I'll come back later on today and water one more time just to make sure everything is saturated with moisture. On to the next pile. So this one I was sent a lot more. I don't know if it's because they don't root as quickly or what, but that was really nice of her to send me some extras here. I love these fat cuttings. This is probably 5/8 inch, diameter, and these fatter cuttings tend to take a little longer to root and put on the top growth, but in the end they turn out to be better cuttings with fatter, healthier roots and just thicker, healthier top growth. These are some really nice cuttings here. I'm excited to see this work. Oh, and don't forget to look out for the dibbler police. They're out and about this morning. I'm sure we'll hear from them here soon. So heck with it, I just decided to water them right away. I just couldn't help it. I get a little impatient sometimes too. I will come back out and water them again later this evening to make sure that bark is fully saturated, because we don't want that drying out in there. Remember, there's no humidity around these things, so they're relying on us to keep those cuttings down there moist. But it's got to be a good draining material. You don't want rot. So I think for now, I'm just going to take these little guys and just set them right over here under these little rhododendrons, because it's shady. They've got a little sunlight, but, well, not sunlight, but light from the plastic of the hoop house here. Remember, you don't need a greenhouse or a hoop house. This is wide open. It freezes in here. It gets hot in here. It does everything that the outside temperature does. It is not regulated in here, but they really don't need too much light yet until they start putting out growth. They have plenty of light to do what they need to do. Some plants do sense light, and that's what makes them start growing. Many plants sense heat, and that's what makes them start growing. I'm covered with either base on these guys right now. They do have plenty of light, even though they're under these rhododendrons, and plenty of warmth as we go through the spring. They should wake up beautifully as we head on into the summer, and I'm excited to see how these things do. You guys are going to get this right now here in just a second, but I promised you a really cool fact. In fact, there's two really, well, one's really cool about mulberries, and one is kind of weird. The first one is this. Did you know, I didn't know this, I found this absolutely fascinating. Did you know that silkworms, true silkworms, only feed on mulberries? And that's where silk comes from. I thought that was crazy. I didn't know that. I know silk comes from that part of the world, Pakistan, Afghanistan, those regions of the world, but I didn't know that the silkworm mainly only feeds on, it was a white mulberry. I thought that was a pretty cool fact. The other thing that was really weird is I was researching these, because I love researching and getting into the plants that I'm learning about and working with, and the histories on them is really interesting to me. But here's something that you might want to consider before you actually plant them at your place. I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't hear too much complaining going on in the forums when we're talking about mulberries and the fruit and growing them, but I did find this information about them. Mulberries are supposedly allergenic. And in Tucson, Arizona, I think it was several decades ago, the growing of mulberries was actually outlawed. You cannot plant mulberries in Tucson, Arizona. And there were some places in Texas as well that you can't plant mulberries because there were so many growing all over the region. Those chickens stop when I stop. There's so many growing all over the region that whatever is allergenic about them is affecting the air quality and people's allergies. I thought that was kind of weird, because everywhere I read online, people that are in love with these mulberries, I've never heard them mention once about the allergies that they can create. So mine are going to be planted out past the fig orchard, probably closer to the pond that we're working on building. So they're not going to be anywhere near my house, and they're out in the open in the country. You know, I've only got a few of them, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, but something you might want to consider. So here we go. I think today is May 29th. I'll put the date up in the, or down there or something like that, and we'll come back when something happens. Here we go. All right, so today is July 10th, and we've got our little mulberry cuttings just growing beautifully. Check that out, guys. I'm so excited about these mulberries. So we've got, once again, the world's best right here. That's, I believe, an unknown variety, and I actually bought those on figbid.com from a lady that got a hold of them. And then this is the traditional Pakistani variety that's got the really long mulberries, and I'm going to learn a lot about these over the next few years. These are my first mulberries I've ever had here, first mulberries I've ever rooted. This is my first time ever rooting mulberries, and there you go. Why did we do it like this? How did we get so much success? Because I understand hardwood cuttings, and I'm trying to help you guys understand them too. I do hear a lot about how Pakistani are harder to root, but we're seeing top growth. The buds are developing. Things are looking really nice. I don't think we're going to have a problem with this at all, and that's because we didn't cover our cuttings. We just stick them in pots with a good draining rooting medium and let them do their thing slowly as nature warms up. So let's look at the bottom of these pots. If you look down here, I don't see any roots, and I've looked under all these little areas. I don't see any roots coming out, but we've got roots. Trust me, these are not covered, and those leaves would be wilting and dying back if they didn't have any roots. So I'm not worried about that at all, but I'm not going to make the mistake I do. I usually rip these things out and show you guys the roots because I want to show you the results. We'll come back and show you in another video how these guys are doing. I guarantee you they're rooted. But now these, the world's best right here, let's look down here and show you. We've got roots coming out the bottom. So you can see there's a root there. Right over here we've got a little root coming through, and there was a couple more I saw somewhere in there, I think in there somewhere. But we've got roots coming out the bottom on these guys. They're a little bit further along. You can see this nice beautiful growth. Look at that. Nice beautiful growth. And it's kind of funny, on these little plants we've already got all these little mulberries starting to grow on these little plants here. Really neat to see. So these are my first mulberries, and we're going to learn a lot about mulberries over the next few years. I'm thinking we're going to plant these things out by that pond area that we're going to have built over time, just to keep them away from the house, because I hear they grow crazy and wild and absolutely huge. So that's where these are going to go. Now let's talk about where we go from here. First of all, I am not going to rip these out. We've seen the roots. I know I've got roots on those, and I've done this in the past to show you guys the roots. And all it does is it just sets these things, there's Henry, all it does is it sets these things back, and they struggle to get reestablished going into winter, and then you lose a bunch. I've decided to leave them just where they sit, leave them put. And that's how I've always done my Japanese maple seeds. And people wonder, well, you plant all these things together in one pot, Mike. Why do you do that, and how do you separate them? Well, it's not a problem. It's a problem right now because these roots are young and tender. But if you wait until they've gone dormant and the roots harden off down in there, they get tough and hard, and you're able to pull them apart without worrying about it at all. And they're dormant. So it's like doing a surgery when somebody's sleeping. They're dormant. It's not going to hurt them. So the next step I'm going to do is just leave them in this pot. And I'm going to actually, now that I know I got roots, and I don't need to worry about getting these things to root anymore, we're just going to put a little slow release fertilizer on these guys. Not too much, just a little slow release fertilizer, and that will break down slowly over the next few months. I'm going to do the same over on this guy, the Pakistani, and we'll just kind of give them a little nutrition, and they'll probably start taking off even faster with this fertilizer that we've got going on here, because now they'll have the nutrients to actually put on more growth. All of this growth they've got so far is all put on because this right here is stored energy they've had in these cuttings, and that's why I like the fatter cuttings. But anything from here on, this fertilizer is really going to help them just take off. So don't worry, Mark, you're going to get one of these world's best, man. I promised it to you. It's coming your way. But I'm going to wait to pull these things apart because I don't want to disturb those roots in there, man. So there it is, mulberry propagation. I learned a lot from this one. They're just as easy as grapes and figs, and it's pretty cool seeing all those little new mulberries just growing already on those little cuttings, and that's all due to the stored energy that they already have in their cuttings. You don't need to cover these things, guys. Proof positive once again. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. We'll come back to these next year probably and see how they developed and how they do. And I'll go ahead and pull them apart and repot them up into individual pots for you guys. So if you like this one, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to follow along. Have a fantastic week, guys. And we'll see you in the next video. Adios. All right. I can't help it. I gotta see what these roots look like. It's now later in the evening. and it's just been bugging me all day. All right, so what we're gonna do here, I'm not gonna tear these things all apart, but I'm just gonna dump this fertilizer that I just put in here this morning out into this tote, and then we're just gonna kind of pull this guy out of the pot without disturbing things, hopefully. I just want to see those roots. I just can't help it. Oh, do we got anything yet? Do we have anything yet? We do. We've got one little thing. Let's take a look quick, because I'm putting this guy back. Look at that. You see them? Do you see those two little roots coming out? Those are little mulberry roots. Look at that, guys. I knew these things had roots. They couldn't possibly look this good and be growing all this green growth without roots. I'm happy. That makes me happy. Now I got to get this fertilizer back on there. But we're going to keep them in there, and they're going to continue to grow. We're not going to disturb them. Let's look at this other one here, because I know this thing's just going to be pouring out. At least I hope so. Let's take a look here. So we'll dump that fertilizer out real quick. And let's see if I can get my fingers in here somehow. And we're just gonna gently tease it out. There it goes. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Look at that, guys. That world's best variety. That sure did root. Beautiful cuttings, man. And beautiful roots just surrounding the inside of that pot. Really cool. And I didn't have to disturb them. Alright, we'll get these guys put back in place. We're good to go. I'll get that fertilizer back on, and we'll be done. We're just going to let these sit, and we're going to watch them go on into next winter, and then pull them apart and pot them up next spring. So that concludes it this time. Go on, scram, beat it.